We're going to start this session with a quote from the book of Jeremiah, the second chapter. And the quote reads like this: I planted you a perfect seed, O Israel, a pure seed. How did you become degenerate? What did you do? You went after foreign gods, Baal, and you worshiped foreign gods. Those gods being, this is Neville's little side note here, the foreign gods being astrology, numerology, wealthy people, important people, all kinds of things outside of self. And God is your own wonderful human imagination. Today we are talking about false gods, idols, false prophets, and superstition. And we are taking this from the mystic perspective, meaning we are going to really seek to understand in a fresh way what all of these ideas mean, what the ancient mystics told us about them, and how we can make this understanding alive in our own awareness. And to do this, we're going to use the story of King Josiah from the Old Testament. His story is found in 2 Kings and also found again recounted in 2 Chronicles. And King Josiah is a state that any of us can choose to embody and to occupy. And King Josiah, as we will learn as we really dive into the story and interpret the metaphysical wisdom encoded in the words of the story, King Josiah really is the one who tears down the false gods, refuses to follow or give belief to the false prophets, and really casts off superstition once and for all. I looked up the word superstition. We understand it, just colloquially what that word means, but I wanted to see what the dictionary actually said superstition means. And I found this a fascinating definition. It says superstition is a belief or practice resulting from ignorance, resulting from fear of the unknown, trust in magic or chance, or, and this is the most important part of this definition, a false conception of causation. Superstition is a false conception of causation. I did some searching through the Neville Goddard lecture archive to find where he talks about these ideas: superstitions, idolatry, false gods, false prophets, the story of King Josiah. And I was able to find some interesting references, and I'm going to read one of them for you right now. This is a quote from his lecture titled The Art of Imagining from 1965. This is what he says: in the Bible, idolatry is really harlotry. Idolatry is adultery. Adultery hasn't a thing to do with sex. All the so-called sex things is churchianity. It is not scripture. And so, when a person goes away from the only God, which is I am, he may go to church every day and all through the day and give his substance to the church, give fortunes to charity. But if he has some other God other than I am, he is really living in adultery. You tell that to the good people of the world, and they'll faint from the shock of it, because they have every God in this world except that God. And so, adultery is simply idolatry. And idolatry means to have another God. Okay. The mystic teachings of the Bible are in many ways our own autobiography, written on a higher level of our being. Okay, this is why the prophecies written in the Bible, we live out in our own lives. The Bible's a prophecy about what we will experience particularly as we go through this earthly existence and begin to awaken to our true identity. The first Adam was a living being. The last Adam was a life-giving spirit. All of us are living that evolution from just merely being a living being to being a life-giving spirit. Okay, we're all on that trajectory. That is the mystic path. That is the journey through the mysteries. How we get from just simply being a human being born of woman to having that second birth, being born from above, truly aware of our inheritance. That's the mystic path. That's the journey that all of us are on. The mystic writings of the Old Testament in particular dramatize some of the things that we experience along this mystic path of awakening. And I'm going to draw your attention now to one particular story, which comes from 2 Kings and is the story of King Josiah. Now, the word Josiah can be defined a couple of different ways, but the one that I was always taught that it means, and I was able to corroborate this with other interpretations, it really means God heals. Okay, so it's this idea of healing is holing. Okay, so the word Josiah, or the name Josiah, the state of Josiah, is to make God whole, right? To heal or become whole through an awareness of I am. Okay, so that's really the definition. Okay, so I'm going to read little excerpts from this story, the New Living Translation. Okay, so it says, this is chapter 22 of 2 Kings. It says, Josiah was 8 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem for 31 years. He did what was pleasing in the Lord's sight and followed the example of his ancestor, David. He did not turn aside from doing what was right. Okay, so remember that David is the man after God's own heart. Okay, so we are the people after God's own heart. We do all of God's will. And this state that is Josiah, which is the wholeness of God, or God becoming whole through the power of I am, is an offspring of being the man after God's own heart. Okay, so it's a state that grows out of our desire to be the man after God's own heart, to be one with this idea in Scripture of David. Okay, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit here. In the 18th year of his reign, King Josiah ordered the temple to be restored. I'm going to paraphrase here because there's a lot of verses. He ordered the restoration of the temple, to hire carpenters, builders, masons, to have them cut the timber, cut the stone to repair the temple. Okay, so when Josiah took over as king, he found that the kings that had ruled before him had left the temple in disarray. And he said, well, I want to honor the temple. Okay, so I want to honor what I know to be real and what I know to be true. Let's rebuild the temple. Okay, so he orders the restoration of the temple, which is an indication of the alignment of his state. He's like, I want to honor what I know to be true. Okay? He orders the restoration of the temple, and when the people who are in charge of the restoration of the temple go in and start to dig out the ruins, they find the book of the law. They find the book of the law, and they bring it to Josiah, and they begin to read from the book of the law. And Josiah hears this book read for the first time, and he tears his robes in mourning. He tears his robes in mourning. And he says, essentially, the Lord's anger is burning against us because we have not obeyed the words in this scroll. We have not been doing what this scroll says we must do. Okay, I'm gonna continue the rest of the story, and then we're gonna break down some of these ideas so that we can understand them very clearly. Because this story, like so many stories in the Bible, is just absolutely packed full of mystic meaning. Okay, so Josiah summons all of the leaders of Judah and Jerusalem, brings them all together, all of the people. He takes his place of authority beside the pillar, and he renews his pledge, his covenant in the presence of the Lord. And he says, we are going to follow all of the terms of the covenant written in this scroll. And then, having dedicated himself to the purpose of being one with I am. Remember, his very name means the wholeness. God heals, I am heals, the wholeness of I am. So really being aligned with that state of being that, he declares and proclaims that his nation will now follow the law of God. But he doesn't stop there, okay? Doesn't stop there. And this is where this story gets really quite intense, okay? The king instructed the high priest, the leading priests, the temple gatekeepers, to remove from the Lord's temple all the utensils that were used to worship Baal, Asherah, and all the forces of heaven. The king had all these things burned outside Jerusalem on the terraces. He carried the ashes away to Bethel. He did away with the pagan priests, for they had burned incense at the pagan shrines. They had offered incense to Baal, to the sun, the moon, the constellations, to all the forces of heaven. The king took down the Asherah pole from the Lord's temple, took it outside Jerusalem to the valley where he burned it. He burned the pole to dust, threw the dust in the public cemetery. He tore down the houses of the shrine prostitutes who were inside the temple of the Lord, where the women wove coverings for the Asherah pole. He brought back to Jerusalem all of the priests who were living in the other towns. He defiled all the pagan shrines. He defiled the shrines where they had burned incense. We're talking about a complete lack of regard, complete disrespect. It's not just, oh, I'm now going to serve I am. It's, I am going to tear down and destroy all of the false gods, the false prophets, the idols, and the superstition. I am going to desecrate them. I am going to destroy them. I'm going to tear them down to dust. The king defiled the altar of Topheth in the valley, so no one could ever use it again as an offering to Molech. He removed the horse statues from the entrance of the Lord's temple. He burned down the chariots dedicated to the sun. He tore down the altars that the kings of Judah had built on the palace roof. He destroyed the altars that had been built in the two courtyards of the Lord's temple. He smashed to bits and scattered the pieces. He desecrated the pagan shrines east of Jerusalem, on the south of the Mount of Corruption. He smashed the sacred pillars, cut down the Asherah poles. He desecrated these places by scattering human bones over them. Then, as Josiah was looking around, he noticed tombs on the side of the hill, and he ordered that the bones be brought out, and then he burned them on the altar at Bethel, specifically for the purpose of desecrating that altar. Then Josiah looked up at the tomb of the man of God who had predicted these things and said, "What is that monument over there?" And the people of the town told him, "It is the tomb of the man who came from Judah, the man of God, who predicted that you would do the things that you had just done to the altar at Bethel." And Josiah replied, "Then leave it alone. Do not disturb that." And then he continues to go on, desecrating and demolishing and casting out and killing the priests of the pagan shrines on their own altars, burning human bones to desecrate them, And then finally, he returns to Jerusalem. So this is a state of being that goes on a tear, evicting, casting out with impunity and also an intensity everything that does not belong within the house of God. Okay, now we understand that the human body is the temple of the living God. Okay, so we understand that really if we are casting out all of these things, we're really casting out beliefs in idols or beliefs in false prophets. Okay, so let's begin to decode some of the words of this story and really see if we can get a clearer picture. Okay, I want to point out that I skipped a lot of this because it's so repetitive, but this man goes on a tear for 2 chapters worth of destroying things. Okay, so this is not just a calm attitude of, oh well, I used to believe that, you know, other people have power over me, but now I believe in my imagination. It's not timid. Okay, there's no timidity in this. This is boldness. This is boldness. This is saying that is false. That is an idol. That is idolatry. That is pagan. That is worshiping a false god. That is superstition, and destroying them. And not just so that they don't exist, but actually desecrating on them. There's a boldness to cast out of the house of God all of these things that are not what we know to be true, and then to make sure that they can never even be restored because we have so thoroughly desecrated them. Okay, that's the state. There's a violence and an aggressiveness to it. But when we go into some of the meanings of some of these words, it becomes very clear. So let's begin to do that. Okay, so one of the things that Josiah does first is he begins to destroy the altars of the people who worship Baal. Okay, the people who worship Baal. Now, Baal, defined by Neville, I found a specific reference where he defines the word Baal. Baal means my owner. My owner. Baal, my owner. Okay, so if you are worshiping Baal, you believe you are owned as a being by someone other than I am, the true name of God. If you have an owner, what does that make you? If you are a man or a woman or a human being and you have an owner, what does that make you?
A slave.
A slave. It makes you a slave. The quote here is, you will not call me, and this is I am speaking, you will not call me my Baal, my owner. You will call me my husband. My husband. Okay, so there's layers of mystic meaning here. Okay, so the husband is the I am impressing into the character, which is the wife, to make the likeness of itself. Okay, so that is a loving, creative relationship. There is no ownership implied in that statement. Okay, that is a loving, creative relationship. Vastly different than this idea of I am owned by another. Okay, so that's one of the first altars that he destroys, is this idea that anyone else can own me. Okay, now we talk about this idea of I am a human being and I'm owned, that makes me a slave. Okay, that's very direct and intense language, but let's consider some of the subtle ways that we could believe that we are owned by another. Okay? If I believe that my company that I work for as an employee is responsible by paying me every week or every month for my economic stability, safety, security, prosperity, if I believe that they are responsible for me being able to provide for myself, have I not given them ownership over my destiny? Have I not subjugated myself to the so-called authority of this company? That is a subtle transfer of power, but how easy is it to do because it is so subtle? And I think this is why we have 2 chapters of destroying false gods, false prophets, idolatry, and superstition. Because if we don't fully destroy them and really claim our power, they can sneak back in. They can sneak back in and we can find ourselves saying things like, well, we'll see what the economy does, as though the economy owns our future or our fortune. At what point does I am consider the economy to be external to itself and give it ownership over its destiny? At no point, not when we know who we are. Those words should never come out of our mouth when we know who we are. Oh, we'll see what the economy does. Oh, we'll see if my employer can continue to make me prosperous. Okay, I am not owned by my employer. My employer is acting out my concepts of stability, prosperity, security, and employment, a weekly, monthly paycheck, whatever it is. The employer is acting that out in my imagination. Okay, that's the power of I am reclaimed, to see that the employer is just a character on the screen of my drama, bringing to me the evidence of who I believe that I am, as opposed to believing that that character is somehow writing the story for me. There's this word, it's considered to be a place. Okay, it's the word is Bethel. And I looked up the word Bethel in Neville's lectures, and I found that he defines the word Bethel as the house of God. Okay, so throughout these 2 chapters of King Josiah's rampage, okay, he is repeatedly removing things and casting things out of Bethel. Okay, casting things out of the house of God. Okay, so what is the house of God? What is the house of God? Where does God live? Okay, so obviously God lives within you and I, and the physical vessel has been called the temple. Okay, so we have the opportunity, we can choose to make a distinction between the temple and the house. Okay, so maybe the temple, as a way of relating to this idea and understanding it, maybe the temple is the physical human body. My temple is, or my body is the temple of the living God. Okay, so maybe the house of God is my life. Okay, if my physical vessel is the temple, then maybe the house of God is my life. Okay, so if the house of God is my life, then we can use this word Bethel. Then now we see Josiah, the state of being that you and I are in when we choose to really realign with the power of I am and really respect the jealous God that I am is. Remember, I am says, I am a jealous God. And there is one commandment that is really the most important of all. And it is, thou shalt have no other gods before me. And who is me? I am. And what is I am? I am is that state of awareness. Okay, so it is my awareness that creates my reality and not anything that I'm aware of. My awareness itself is the creative power, not what I'm aware of. If I believe that what I'm aware of is the creative power, I have made what I'm aware of an idol, and I have transferred my power to it. It becomes a false god. Okay? There's also this idea of Judah. Okay, so he's talking about casting out from the temples of Judah or the house of Judah. Okay, so Judah is the hand of God and also the betrayer. Okay, so the betrayer, Judah, Judas, according to Neville, those 2 words, those 2 names are essentially the same state or the same being. Okay, and Judah is the word of God, the truth. His name is called the truth, the word of God. The truth, the word of God reveals God, and that's Judah. So Judah is the betrayer. Has nothing to do with how the church sees it of, Judah did something wrong. Judah reveals who Christ is. Okay, so Judah reveals that state of Christ within each of us. Judah reveals the second birth, right? The second born, the life-giving spirit. Remember, the first Adam is a living being. The last Adam is a life-giving spirit. Judah is the one that reveals that the truth of that all takes place within us. Okay, so as Josiah is going on this rampage and he's tossing these things out of the house of Judah, which is the house of God, the mystic wisdom that is being conveyed here is that we are casting out of our life anything that distracts or redirects or in any way takes us away from that supreme place of power, point, and presence. That place of power, that point of presence, which is the awareness of I am. Okay. So he's going through and he's tearing down all of these things. What would that look like in our lives? What would it look like in our lives if we tore down all of these things? Okay, so we're going to give some examples. We talked about the very subtle ways that these transfers of power can enter our language by, looking at something like the economy or the government or my employer or, someone else over there, really anything on the outside and saying, oh no, the authorship is with them. They're going to write this part of the story for me. Okay. When we do that, we invoke the anger of I am. Now that anger is the jealousy of I am. The jealousy of I am. I am says, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Now, this doesn't mean that we're going to be punished by someone outside of ourselves. Okay, so this whole idea of a jealous God, that jealous God is not outside of ourselves. Our own awareness is jealous. Our own awareness is jealous of false gods that we would put before our own awareness of I am. So we must cast those out and return back to first principles, reclaim ownership of this primordial awareness of I am. Okay, so Josiah is going on his rampage after finding the book of the law. What is the book of the law? The book of the law can be said a couple different ways. In the age of Neville and modern mysticism, we would say the book of the law, the key teaching is that imagination creates reality. We could say it a couple of other ways. The book of the law is that I am that I am. That's the core teaching. I am that I am. I am the I am that is responsible for all that I am aware of. The book of the law is essentially the teaching of first principles. It's the teaching that consciousness is the only reality. It's the teaching that what I become aware of, I will begin to experience in my reality. And it's a return to first principles in that way. When the book of the law is forgotten, that's how we begin to give birth to religions that teach that, God is some angry man up in the sky. Okay, or God is, a planet or a star. Okay, it's something in creation. No, it's a part of God, but that is not God. We cannot externalize God in that way. Okay, there is nothing but God in the world, so we can't say it's not God, but it is not the sole entity that is God. That sole entity that is God is I am. Okay, so we cannot remove ourselves from that equation and say God is over there. If we do that, that's when we're entering the state that King Josiah comes to destroy. Okay, so Josiah goes through this entire rampage and he is pulling out all of these things. He is destroying, he is desecrating, he is murdering the priests of false religions. And then he issues an order. Once he gets back to Jerusalem, he issues an order. And he says, now it is time to celebrate the Passover. Now it is time to celebrate the Passover. And having gone through all of the episodes of Sunday Mystery School, where we really understand this idea of state of being creating our reality, When I am in a state of being, my reality mirrors back to me my state of being. And if I desire to experience something different in my reality, I have to change myself. Remember, that was the first teaching of Sunday Mystery School in season 1. There is no one to change but self. Okay, so this idea of Passover is the idea of passing over from one state of being to another. Okay, so this is a profound reclamation of my power. This, when we're acting out the state of King Josiah, we powerfully reclaim our power of I am, and then we celebrate the Passover. We celebrate the Passover. Okay, so then if I think that maybe my employer is not going to give me the financial security, right? Whatever is happening there, and I used to give the power to them, but now I'm, oh, wait, I am. Then I pass over into the state where I boldly appropriate my own security. I have reclaimed my power from the outside, okay? And now I'm boldly appropriating by passing over to that new state of consciousness. And that's dramatized right here in the mystic scriptures, the mystic teachings, as Josiah going on this rampage, destroying all the false gods, prophets, idols, profoundly reclaiming the power of I am, and then celebrating the power of I am in action, which is the passing over from one state to a new state. And the Bible says, never before had there been a king like Josiah, who turned to the Lord with all his heart and soul and strength, obeying all of the laws of Moses. Okay, so that word Moses is to draw out, to draw out, to draw out of oneself. So there's laws associated with drawing out of oneself. And when we begin to obey these laws, you and I begin to enact the state that is dramatized in Scripture as this being named Josiah, who turned to the Lord, who turned to the power of I am with all of his heart and soul and strength, and began to obey all of the laws of our being, of Moses, to draw out all of the laws of how to change our state of being. Josiah began to obey them, and that is what made him distinctive as a king of Israel, a state of being that rules Israel. And we understand in the mystic teachings that the word Israel means to rule as God. That's what that word means, Israel, the one who rules as God. So the one who rules as God is all of us always, but we will enter different states in our journey to becoming the last Adam, which is the life-giving spirit. Okay? And one of the states that we move through is the state of King Josiah. And we do all of these things. Okay, so I want to go a little bit more into examples of superstitions, false gods, and idols, and false prophets. Let's start with false prophets. Okay. We are living in the liquid modernity, and any of us who have access to the internet and visit it in any way, shape, or form have realized that we are swimming in a sea of voiced opinion. Okay, never before in human history have so many humans been able to speak out into the public square of the internet what they think about this, that, or the other. A sea of voiced opinion. Okay, so there's an opinion about everything from everyone, and it's all there on the internet. And a lot of these people who have opinions about things are very creative, and they make videos, and they make media, and they do podcasts, and they do this and that and everything else. And really what they're doing is they are broadcasting their opinion as loudly as possible. Okay, and they're saying this is going to happen, this other thing is going to happen. You know, astrologer predicts this is going to happen. Psychic remote viewer says that this is in our future. Okay, the simulation is ending. Man visits the afterlife, says this is what happens next. Okay, these are some video titles that I've seen on YouTube. Okay, here's the deal. This can all be very entertaining. It can be. But when you're in the state of King Josiah, you have no time for it. You have no time for it because you understand that anything they're saying is simply conjecture. has nothing to do with anything. It's really quite frivolous. And honestly, if we're really going to talk from the state of King Josiah, it is a leak of energy to pay any attention to those people. It is a leak of energy because they're not creating our reality. Who is creating our reality? Who is creating my reality? I am. 2 words, I am. Not Joe the astrologer, not Susie the prophesier, not Michael the seer. Okay? I am. The power is here. I am creating my reality. Remember in Neville and Chill, we've talked extensively about the polyverse. This idea of the polyverse is that what is true for me, I will experience as true for me, and it has nothing to do with you. Okay, so your beliefs can be true for you. My beliefs are true for me. And we can be sharing an experience of reality and have completely different actual lived experiences because our truths are different. Okay, so the astrologer, the prophet, the seer, the remote viewer, whatever modern words we want to throw on all of that, they can be prophesying for their own reality. You know, the people that are like, oh, the dark things that are coming in the future as, all of these technologies take over our planet. Okay, yeah, sure. You can believe that for your version of the polyverse. If that's true for you, that's what you're going to experience. That does not mean I'm going to experience that unless I give my power of authorship to you and say, yeah, I'm going to let you write this next chapter of the story for me. Okay? And King Josiah is not the person who does that. King Josiah says, I have no time for you. I'm not going to entertain what you have to say about anything. I'm not going to consult with seers and prophesiers or really look at anyone who's trying to tell me what's going to happen next, because I know that I am the one who creates what happens next for me with my state of being. I just glanced down at the page right here and my eyes fell right on this paragraph. And keep in mind, this is 2 chapters of Rampage. This is what it reads. Josiah also exterminated the mediums and psychics, the household gods, and every other kind of idol worship, both in Jerusalem and throughout the land of Judah. Throughout the land of God, the psychics, the mediums, the household gods, every kind of idol was cast out. He destroyed it. He exterminated. I think the reason why the ancient mystic writers wrote so much detail about Josiah destroying, these people who worshiped this thing, this idea that worshiped this other thing, they go into so much detail. And I really think that the key idea that is being transmitted through this really tremendous amount of detail is the boldness of the state. Okay, this is not a small state of being. This is bold. It is courageous. This is a state of authority. This is the state of authorship that boldly asserts the power of I am. Okay, someone who's playing small cannot do what King Josiah did. Okay, King Josiah, heard I am that I am. My imagination creates reality. And what did he do immediately? He tore his robes. Okay, so what are the robes? The robes are the state of being. I was in a state where I didn't know that I am that I am and that my imagination creates reality. So I'm immediately going to tear that state apart. Okay, because I am convicted. That's the word that was used. Josiah heard the teaching from the word of God, the book of the law, and he was convicted. He was like, I have been living a life where I gave my power away to others. I am complicit in this idolatry. I have been practicing superstition. And remember, superstition, false concept of causation. Josiah says, I've been believing that someone else was creating or the cause. Something on the outside was the cause of my reality. And so he tore that state apart. He tore those robes and he went into mourning. He was like, what have I done with my power? And then he says, we're going to remedy this situation. We're going to cast out all of these idols. They will not stand in my temple, which is my own vessel. Temple of the living God is the human body. They will not stand in my life. My life is Bethel, the house of God. Okay, so a couple other ways that these ideas can sneak in, and the ideas that King Josiah ultimately serves to destroy. Okay, so one of the gods that is listed specifically as being worshipped that Josiah casts out. Okay, so we talked about Baal, which is my owner. Okay, so we cast out the idea that we are owned by anyone other than I am, and I am is not even our owner; it is our husband. Okay, and there's obviously a mystical significance there that we discovered. Then the other one that it pointed out that I looked up is Molech. It says Josiah found the prophets and the priests who worshiped Molech, found their altars, the sites where they made sacrifices to Molech, and he destroyed them. Okay, so I looked up Molech to seek to understand this idea more clearly and share it with you all. And I found in Neville's lecture about the 7 eyes of God, he says the second eye of God is Molech. And he says Molech is the strange god that demands sacrifices, Man offers up his sons and daughters to appease this being he conceives to be God. But the voice said, I command them not, neither came it into my mind that they should do this abomination and cause Judah to sin. This I is in every man who thinks he has angered God and must make sacrifices to appease him. All of the wars of the world are an appeasement. The Inquisition with its tortures was an appeasement to God. The wicker baskets in which men were burned alive were an appeasement. They did it all to appease God that he might not be angry. Okay, so this idea that God is apart from ourself and requires some sort of sacrifice, that I have to give up something to please God, that concept that I have to give up something to please God externalizes God subtly, but it externalizes God. I don't have to give up anything to be God. I am God right now. To give up something, to make a sacrifice, to try to appease an external God is an abomination. God is jealous about that too, because now we're worshiping something other than that supreme state of I am. There are many other types of priests and pagan shrines and pagan religions and names. You know, there's the Asherah poles, there's Ashtoreth, the detestable goddess. There's all of these different names of things, and that are being destroyed by King Josiah as he's casting them out. And as we go into each one, we see the same thing represented over and over again, that we are the state that is represented by these pagan priests is the state of giving our power of our consciousness and our awareness, the power of I am, to something on the outside. Okay? So thinking that anything other than our awareness of being is causative is a belief in a false God. I'm going to say that again. thinking that anything other than our awareness of being, the I am that I am, is causative, that there's causative power in anything other than our awareness, is belief in a false God. That means if something happens in your life, even if you forget what your imaginal act was that created it, if you assume that anything on the outside was the causative power, then you have transferred your power, the creative power of I am, to an external God. Okay? And that's exactly what the state of King Josiah here is to undo and to destroy. Okay, now to make this practical and also wise, let's go a little bit deeper into this. Okay, so there's a difference between the original causation and intermediate causation. Neville talks about this. He says, ends ultimate and temporary, I think is what he's talking about, where he's talking about this. It's this idea of like, okay, yes, this person over here did something, and the consequence of them doing it was this, this, and this. And then because this, and this happened, this other person did this, and now I'm experiencing this. Okay. Now, all of those are intermediate causes. Okay. They're all things that happened on the external and were part of the bridge of incidents. The key point here is that these other people did not originate it. Okay. They are simply acting out. They're simply acting out. No man comes unto me, save the Father in me draw him. When we make that statement with authority, no other comes to me, no man, no manifestation, no person, no place, thing, situation, or event, or circumstance comes to me, save the Father in me draws him. Okay, that's the state of recognition of the power of I am. To say, I didn't draw that, the I am in me, the Father in me did not draw that, that would be denying the power of I am, which would invoke that jealous wrath, which is just simply the I am saying, look, you're becoming a degenerate, right? Remember that first verse that we read there? I planted you a perfect seed. How did you become degenerate? You gave your power away, right? It's easy to do. We're not being condemned for it. But when we do it, we really sell ourselves short. We really sell ourselves short. When we give anyone else the power of authorship over our experience, we're selling ourselves short. And all of us have done it at one point or another. That's why King Josiah is not the one and only king. He's a king that arrives after a long line. He's portrayed as arriving after a long line of corrupt kings who gave their power away and built these shrines, built these altars to these other ideas that are false sense of causation, superstitions, false conceptions of causation, superstitions. Okay, so King Josiah emerges as a state of being within you, within I, when we recognize the book of the law, when the book of the law is found, when it comes into our life, when someone comes to us and we have the ears to hear it, and you hear someone who's of the mystic tradition, because that's who teaches this. A mystic says, it's your imagination that's creating your reality. It's your own state of being that you are experiencing in the mirrors of your world. When someone says that and you hear it, and something responds in you, that's when you begin to order the rebuilding of the temple, and you begin to cast out everything that is not that your ancestors, which are your former states, had invited in. Okay, so your ancestors, the former states that were not aware, invited in false gods, false prophets, idols, and superstitions. And then here emerges the state that is King Josiah. And King Josiah takes the power back with an authority, with a boldness with courage. And according to the scriptures, even with violence. Now, obviously, that violence is not something occurring on the outside. We're not destroying anything on the outside, but we are violently destroying our belief in false gods, idols, false prophets, any causative power on the outside, superstitions. We are violently destroying them. And not just getting rid of them, we are desecrating them. We are pointing at them and saying, I see how you are flawed. I see how you are false. I see how this is a lie. Right? And then we are casting it off. And then, as we move forward in our lives, we really are standing firmly in our creative power, and we do not leak our energy to other people who claim to be able to write the future for us. We stand firmly and courageously and boldly in our power, and we say, I am the author of my own reality. My state of being writes what I will experience in the future, and no other person does it for me. I am not owned by another. My maker, the I am that I am, is my husband, pressing into the vessel that is my local human character, the image of itself, which is that state of being. And so I, in my local human sense, am giving life and expression to the state of being that I have chosen in the silence of my own being. And I firmly refuse to transfer that power. I guard it jealously, right? That I am is a jealous God. That's you and I. We are jealous of our I am power, meaning we guard it jealously, right? We are, that power within us will not be subjugated to another, will not be transferred to another. We guard it fiercely as the state of King Josiah dramatizes. Okay. I feel like there's more symbolism here, but I feel like we've landed the basic idea here. So let's talk a little bit about homework, and then I'm going to invite the mastermind to contribute anything that they have for this conversation. Okay, so homework. To make this mystic teaching alive in your life, your homework is to contemplate the state of being that is King Josiah. It's a state of being. It's dramatized by these ancient mystics in the scriptures to help you connect. Maybe go and read the passage for yourself. It's 2 Kings 22. Begin to contemplate the state that is King Josiah. Begin to contemplate it in your own life. Begin to consider what the false gods, false prophets, idols, and superstitions that your previous states may have invited into your house of God, which is your life. Begin to consider that and invite the state that is King Josiah, that wholeness of God. Remember, Josiah means God heals. Okay, invite that wholeness of God into your experience. Invite that state. Begin to enter the state of King Josiah. Specifically this week, have a week of King Josiah, right? Have a week of being in that state where you have no time, you have no energy for other authors of your reality. You're boldly appropriating the power of I am for yourself directly in your own experience. You need no intermediary. You need no one to pray for you. You can boldly appropriate and boldly assume the power of I am for yourself. That is the state of King Josiah. Remember, it says, never before had there been a king like Josiah, who turned to the Lord, the power of I am, with all of his heart and soul and strength. And may that be you and I. May we turn to the power of I am with all of our heart, soul, and strength. And may we obey all of the laws of Moses. Okay. At this time, I'd like to invite the mastermind. Anyone has any contributions?
All right. So I have a question that was absolutely wonderful, though. Like, I completely felt this episode. But I have a question.
Yes.
Given our understanding that we create our own reality, does our past belief in being controlled by external forces still impact us in any way?
That's an excellent question. That's an excellent question. So I will share from personal experience my how I relate to this question. So there was a time when I became aware of the power of I am.
Right.
And then I became aware of some of these conversations that I was having inside of my own head that were not up to speed with the power of I am. It's like old conversations. So
Exactly.
I had to root them out. I had to uproot them and cast them out. And I remember I did it very directly, like how King Josiah might do it.
Mhm.
I remember I spoke out loud and I said, I reclaim my power of authorship from all of these things that I used to believe in outside of me that had some sort of power to cause things to
Mhm.
happen to me. I take it back. And so
Right.
I like really pulled it back. And so
Okay.
that was the first step, was like very making a declaration. And the second
Hmm.
step is to be vigilant, right? To be vigilant. Even today, from time to time, a little thought will sneak in.
Right.
Oh, what if the government does this? What if, these other people do this other thing? And I have to catch it and say, I don't believe they have any power.
Exactly.
Not over I am. They are not my owner,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's watching, right? It's
Right.
watching. Make
Being
that
a,
declaration and then it's just
okay.
watching to make sure it doesn't.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you for that beautiful question, Orlena.
Mhm.
Anyone else in the Zoom room? Channel Mastermind. Okay. Looks like the mastermind is complete with that. Okay. So, all right. So this is one of those lessons, teachings, ideas that we cannot leave in the realm of intellectual contemplation. This has to become alive in us. And I chose to go with this theme for today because I really feel like this is one of those key ideas that every mystic has to enter this state and really become aware. Like it's a like it says there's never been a king before quite like King Josiah, because it really is a specific state of awareness, but all of us will move through it on this path. And so we have the opportunity to invite in a very real, direct, personal experience with this wisdom and make it alive in our lives. So that's really what this lesson exists to convey, is the power of this state of being, of reclaiming authorship, reclaiming ownership of I am, right? And there's so much mystic wisdom and metaphysical interpretation that we didn't even get into. The chapters are loaded with it, but the key essence of the teaching we have surfaced in this moment. So now the question is, will we choose to apply it? Will we choose to embody the state of King Josiah? And I'm honored that I was named after King Josiah in the Old Testament. My parents were inspired to name me that. And I also feel that that role is a big part of the work of all mystics. And then also in this moment, I'm also casting out, for my own life, but then also encouraging others to do it as well. So it really is this state that we can give life to. And so that's the question. Will you take this teaching and make it alive in you? And the best way to do that is to really invite that state into the house of God, into your life, into the temple, into your body, into your mind, your body, your spirit, your soul, to really make it alive in you. And then to see where maybe you have been transferring your power and to boldly reclaim it. And then to seal the energy leaks. Because remember, he didn't just say, oh, we're not going to go visit those altars anymore. He destroyed the altars. He desecrated them so they could never be used again. That is the invitation that is alive for you and I, is to destroy those altars so they can't sneak back in ever again. Never again will we turn to the right or to the left, right? We will walk straight in the wisdom and the power of I am. Okay. So that's all for this episode of Sunday Mystery School. Thank you to everyone who joined me live and to those of you in the recording. Thank you for your presence. We sense your energy now. And I look forward to continuing this conversation in the next. Imagine wisely, everyone, and we will see you again soon.